Let's talk about Jerome H. Powell, because our good friend has had it up to here. Today was Jerome Powell's final speech at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Jackson Hole, a very, very beautiful part of the country where rich people fly in and pay zillions of dollars to ski and buy mansions and hang out. And every year, once a year around August, some of the central banking elite from all over the world fly out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and they talk about central banking and discuss things and debate things and make plans. And then Jerome Powell, as chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve, gives a speech sort of giving an idea of this sort of state of the Fed, what economic policy is like, what they're looking at, what they see going forward. It's a pretty important speech. It's always listened to very closely and analyzed very closely. This is going to be his last one today, this morning. I watched it in bed. I literally woke up to my phone. Ari was annoyed. Did I cry? Yeah, I was tearing up. It's the end of an era. We're losing the GOAT. Listen, I've had my qualms with Jerome Powell, but as his time comes to the end, I have to say he's been a remarkably stable central banker, and he has done a good job at resisting political pressure. So anyway, this is his last one, but because by early 2026, he's going to be replaced. Trump has made it very, very clear that he wants Jerome Powell out. He can't force him out without panicking the markets, but when his term is up in May of next year, he'll be gone, so he will not make it to another Jackson Hole. Quick reminder before we go over his speech today of the basics of central banking. They have what is called a dual mandate. A dual mandate is not one gay date. It is when you have two key goals. The two key goals of America's central bank, their dual mandate, are price stability and full employment. So the two things they're scared of are inflation, prices going up, and everyone getting fired. And their central goal is to stop these two things. That is the goal of the central bank. Now, these problems are in opposition. If you think the biggest problem is inflation, what you want to do is raise interest rates to slow down the economy, cool things off, prevent prices from rising. If you think the biggest problem is employment and everyone's getting fired, you want to lower interest rates so that it's easy to borrow money, people start spending more, jobs pick up, the economy starts going, okay? This is the main basics. Dual mandate, and you base on which one's the bigger problem. Now, the key part of this speech is Jerome Powell saying, well, here's the thing. Here's the thing about our dual mandate. They're kind of both a problem.
In the near term, risks to inflation are tilted to the upside and risks to employment to the downside. A challenging situation. When our goals are in tension like this, our framework calls for us to balance both sides of our dual mandate.
In layman's terms, you could say we're fucked. But yeah, I think he would say it's not easy. We're not in an easy environment, okay? We have risks to both directions, so we can't very easily decide to raise or lower rates. That's the main thing. However, the speech goes on. There's much more to be said. And I want you to understand the context going into this meeting is that everybody in the world, basically everybody, is telling Jerome Powell, you gotta lower rates. You gotta juice the economy. The bigger risk is employment. Don't worry about inflation as much, worry about that. This is what everyone with power is saying. Trump is saying it, Wall Street's saying it, even Jim Cramer cursed on national TV. Jim Cramer, by the way, classic Wall Street TV show.
Our biggest problem is we have so much growth that the Fed won't cut.
What the fuck? Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I take it right back.
Everybody,
I take it right back.
It's okay. It's okay. We're in the moment.
I take it right back.
It's just the way
I take
we
it right back.
talk.
Bro, it's so funny. He's apologized more for that than for giving people bad trading advice for 20 years. He's ruined a lot of people's retirements, but he's apologizing for saying fuck. Who cares, dude? So Jerome Powell went on and he discussed both of these problems in bigger detail. First up was inflation.
At the same time, GDP growth has slowed notably in the first half of this year to a pace of 1.2%, roughly half the 2.5% pace in 2024. The decline in growth has largely reflected a slowdown in consumer spending. As with the labor market, some of the slowing in GDP likely reflects slower growth of supply or potential output.
So I want to pause and say, people thought, because this is his last speech, he was going to go to town on Trump. People were saying he might just let it all rip. He might just talk some shit. Jerome Powell, as always, kept his cool. But he did include many, many references to how shitty tariffs are. He did, throughout the speech, constantly say how his job is much harder because of the economic uncertainty of tariffs.
Estimates based on the latest available data indicate that total PCE prices rose 2.6% over the 12 months ending in July. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.9%, above their level of a year ago, rising unemployment.
What he's saying there is that they have a goal for inflation. You know, I said that one of their dual mandates is inflation. Their goal is to keep inflation to 2%. That's the idea. They've decided that 0% inflation is no good. They need a little bit of inflation, and the goal is 2%. It's kind of an arbitrary number, but that's been the number, 2%. And as you guys know, when we lived through it in 2021 and post-COVID, is inflation, you know, it kind of looked like this. It was around 2%, a little under actually. Then it spiked way up during COVID, and now it's headed back down after they raise interest rates. The problem is it never got back down to 2%. It never got back down. It stalled out around 2.7, 2.8, and is now kind of slowly rising again. So it never actually got back to what we want. And by the way, the prices are not even, this is still prices going up, not even going down. Like, so you would say, and Jerome Powell has said this in previous meetings, the job is not done. We haven't even broken the back of inflation yet. Like, inflation is still sticky. It's still above where we want. And he's sort of making that case here. So if you listen to just this part of the speech, you would think, oh, okay, they're going to keep rates high. They're not going to lower rates because inflation is not defeated yet. But he went on.
While the labor market appears to be in balance, it is a curious kind of balance that results from a marked slowing in both the supply of and demand for workers. This unusual situation suggests that downside risks to employment are rising.
So let's explain that a little bit. He's basically saying the labor market hasn't cracked yet. Everyone's not on the streets. Everyone's not unemployed. However, we're not seeing new jobs. What we're seeing is what you might call a no hire, no fire job market, where if you have a job, you're relatively safe from being fired right now. But if you don't have one, it's almost impossible to find one. It's like this limbo. There's like no job openings, but there's not mass layoffs. And what he says in this is when you're in a no hire, no fire situation, the risk of it becoming a really bad situation is very high. Because if it goes no hire, no fire into no hire, some fire, or a lot of fire, then suddenly everyone's unemployed and there's no jobs, okay? The risks are very high. And this is what I've been saying nonstop for a long time now. I mean, this is how previous recessions have started, is like it goes into a limbo and then the layoffs start and then things are really bad. And he is basically saying that here. He's saying,
and if those risks materialize, they can do so quickly in the form of sharply higher layoffs and rising unemployment.
Yes.
At the same time, GDP growth has slowed notably in the first half of this year to a pace of 1.2%, roughly half the 2.5% pace in 2024. The decline in growth has largely reflected a slowdown in consumer spending. As with the labor market, some of the slowing in GDP likely reflects slower growth of supply or potential output. Turning to inflation, higher tariffs have begun to push up prices in some categories of goods. Estimates based on the latest available data indicate that total PCE prices rose to...
So I kind of covered that, but here's the basic thing, all right? So over the course of this speech, he basically says, look, inflation's a problem, unemployment's a problem. But if we had to be honest here, we're more scared of unemployment than we are of inflation. And he gives two reasons. The main one is that they see tariffs as a one-time price increase. So it's not really inflation. To a consumer, that doesn't matter. Everything's more expensive. But what he's saying to an economist, you know, if your shoes are 25% more expensive because of the 25% tariff, that's a one-time thing and it's done. You get used to that eventually and it's not continually rising. And I guess I could sort of see that argument, but I think it underestimates the pain on consumers from that price increase, but okay. And then he also said this, and this is pretty important. Tariffs are not just going to hurt the inflation side of our mandate, it's also gonna hurt the job side of our mandate. Tariffs are hurting both. And you know, there's layoffs coming because of tariffs, which is very true. This is the biggest takeaway from the meeting. This is because again, the point of these meetings, he'll never say exactly what they're going to do. He will always say, we're going to be data dependent and you don't know our decision. But people have become very good at reading into what they're saying to try and guess whether they're going to cut rates or raise rates. It's like everyone watches closely. They write down every word. They try to study it. Okay. That's very studied. And what they realized is that the main takeaway was he said, we are no longer trying to get down to the 2% goal. Instead, we have a new framework that tries to get like an average of 2% over a long period of time. And once you say that, the jig is up. You're basically saying that you're giving up the fight on inflation in order to hopefully save the job market. That is what you're saying. That becomes very clear. Like you're pulled in two directions and you are giving up the inflation fight to try and help the job fight. And so the market understood very quickly the time has come for rate cuts. Jerome Powell is going to do what Wall Street and Donald Trump has wanted for a while, cut rates, juice the economy. And he may be right to do so. I don't want to act like this is like him giving in to Trump. He's held his ground for a long time. It may just be that the job market is so bad that they have to start getting ahead of it. And it's like inflation be damned. We can't have everyone be unemployed. That is a possibility. It is real. The poly market for this spiked around during the meeting, but very quickly, the blue line, which is cutting rates, clearly is the winner. People seem to think after this meeting, 80% chance they're cutting rates, almost no chance they hold steady. Now, if you know anything about the stock market, this was crack cocaine to them. When the stock market hears about rate cuts, a gigantic green line comes out of the ground and everything goes green, okay? Even though in actuality, the rate cut usually doesn't matter that much. The mere idea of it coming is so juicy to markets that we had a real green day as everyone digested Powell's words. Now, it's tough. I have respect for Jerome Powell in ways, and I do think he's being data dependent here. And I agree that the labor market is terrible, so maybe he's the right thing to do. But I read some financial opinions that have dissenting voices that basically said, look, stocks are at all-time highs. There's still meme stocks. There's still a ton of frothy activity in the market. Housing is still at all-time highs. Are you going to tell me we need to cut rates? It's crazy. And I could agree with that. They're going to run this hot like you can't even believe. This is like the logical conclusion here is that we're going to see a real weakness in the dollar, probably a real rise in gold. Like this sounds like inflation is going to come rip-roaring back, would be the takeaway. A real rip-roaring. So that was Jerome Powell's speech today. I wanted to give you an update on what happened. Jerome Powell is pretty much committing to a rate cut in September to hopefully get things going and save the labor market. I do think combining that with tariffs, things are going to get really expensive. What was the last dot plot? I think dot plots are over discussed in this chat by people that want to mention that they know what dot plots are. The truth is that there's never been a dot plot that overruled the central banker. The dot plot is just the opinions of the other federal banks. They vote. Yes, I know they vote, but he makes his opinion known and then they vote on that. There's never a situation where he gets outvoted. It's never happened. You know, his word is what matters in this. And what I'm saying is right now, the dot plot, here we can pull it up. People are using their votes and their public dissent to signal, at least recently, that they would like to be considered for Jerome Powell's job. So like people that are like saying, hey, we need to cut really hard and fast, you know, we need to, like the ideal thing is a huge cut. They're signaling to Trump that they would be a great choice because they're going to cut rates, is the idea. It's a little bit of politics to it. So anyway, that's where we find ourselves. Is rates are going to get cut. Possibly will juice the stock market. Possibly will juice Trump's polling numbers. Possibly will juice the economy. But will likely lead to a weakness in the dollar and inflation running higher than average. Won't it be devastating when Trump nominates a puppet who acts on a whim? It depends on how independent his nominee is seen as being. But yeah, this is a real risk. If Trump nominates like the Heritage Foundation guy he brought into the White House to be chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he starts immediately cutting rates, people will flee the dollar. Yeah, of course. Or Ron Vara, yeah. Or Eric Trump. It is a big risk for sure, 100%. Will this impact the midterms? Yes. Well, they want it to. That's why this thing calls him Max Burns. This post calling him Full Burns is not a reference to Monty Burns from Simpsons. It's a reference to Arthur Burns, who was a central banker under Nixon, who got pressured into cutting before a big election. And the idea is that these cuts are somewhat politically motivated, at least on Trump's side. Trump wants them for that reason, because it's good for your election standing to cut rates. It juices the economy in the short term, and you don't feel the inflation till later. It depends on how fast inflation roars back, honestly. I guess what I'll say is, if I want to summarize my thoughts here, because it's kind of mixed. They are in a tough spot, and maybe the right call is a small cut. I'm actually not opposed to this cut. It's more that I think they're underestimating how angry people already are with inflation. And that if it were to happen again before we even got back to normalcy, I think the anger is going to be so severe. People are really at their edge when it comes to inflation.